Hello everyone. So today we are going to discuss about dento-osseous structures and TMJ. This is a relatively interesting chapter, and it's more related to what you have learned or what you're going to learn in general anatomy. So if you have not learned it in general anatomy, when after dealing with this chapter, you will be taught all these things in general anatomy. So that time also, please go through this topic again. Now, this chapter we will be dealing with the anatomy of the TMJ, the various ligaments, and the movement of the TMJ, the various muscles associated with that movement, also the vascular and nerve supply of the TMJ and the dentofacial region. So, these are the important things we are revising in this chapter. Also, keep in mind that here again, picture-based questions are more often asked from this chapter also. So, especially with regard to the TMJ and the vascular supply and the nerve supply, they can give you pictures and ask you to identify the structures. So please go through the pictures. Either you can follow the pictures given in the PPT or in the textbook Wheeler's Anatomy or any other anatomy textbook, but please keep an understanding of important structures in the dentofacial region. So to begin with, temporomandibular joint, it is having a gynecomastia articulation there's a combination of gliding movement as well as a loose hinge movement. So there are two types of movement in TMJ, a gliding movement as well as a loose hinge movement. Now, which are the bonds involved or the osseous structures involved in the TMJ complex? One is your condylar process of the mandible. So the condylar process of the mandible is articulating to the mandibular fossa or glenoid fossa in the cranial base, and also the boundary of this TMJ is formed by the articular eminence of the temporal bone. So these are the important osseous structures involved in the TMJ complex. One is your mandible, that is your condylar process of the mandible. The second one is your mandibular fossa or glenoid fossa in the cranial base, and third one is the articular eminence of the temporal bone. Now, between the condyle and the temporal bone, that is in the TMJ, we have already seen it is formed by the condylar process of the mandible as well as the articular eminence of the temporal bone and the glenoid fossa of the cranial base. So, between the temporal bone region and the condylar region of the mandible, there is a dense collagenous connective tissue. So, that is called as your articular disc. So in the central area, that is between the articular surface of the condyle and between the temporal bone, articulating surface of the temporal bone, in the central region there is a avascular hyalinized region which is devoid of nerve supply. So articular disc is like a dense collagenous connective tissue interposed between the condylar and the temporal bone. So please look at the picture. Please be thorough with these structures, because previous year the same picture was asked for the exams, and they asked you to identify the structures. So they can ask you any of the structures given in these pictures, because this is taken from the standard textbook. So please be thorough with such pictures and please able to identify the structures here. Here you can see the temporal bone articulating surface, which is given in a brown shade, and correspondingly there is the articular surface of the condyle on the condylar process, and in between there is an avascular part of the meniscus which is hyalinized and devoid of nerve supply. Also you can see synovial membrane, and also the muscle attachments are also shown here, the lateral pterygoid muscle with superior head and inferior head. So these are the important structures being shown in this picture, and please remember, articular disc is nothing but a dense collagenous connective tissue between the articulating surface of the condyle and the temporal bone, and in the central area it is hyalinized, avascular and devoid of nerve supply. Now this articular disc actually cannot be seen on radiographs. Even though you take a radiograph, you might be able to identify the TMJ and the TMJ joint, but the articular disc is not visible on radiographs, but the bony structures involved in the TMJ can be visualized by a transcranial projection. So bony structures in single plane can be viewed by a transcranial projection. Now again look at this picture. You can see that the lateral pterygoid muscle and the superior head of this lateral pterygoid muscle is getting inserted into the disc and the capsule. So, we have already seen what is an articular disc. It is a dense collagenous connective tissue between the condyle and the temporal bone in the articulating surface of the condyle and the temporal bone. So, to this articular disc, a part of the superior head of the lateral pterygoid muscle is also getting inserted. Now, the articular disc actually divides the TMJ spaces into upper and lower compartments, which provides for the smooth gliding function. So, please look at the picture. On the top left corner, you can see the upper joint space, and on the right portion, on the right lower portion, you can see the lower joint space. So this articulating surfaces is divided into two components by the articular disc, and there is also one intermediate zone which is being shown in this picture. So you can see the upper joint space, the lower joint space, the intermediate zone, as well as you can see the lateral pterygoid muscle. The superior head, a part of the superior head of the lateral pterygoid muscle is getting inserted into the disc as well as the capsule. So, apart from articular disc, an important structure associated with TMJ is the joint capsule. In the previous slide, we have seen that a part of the superior head of the lateral pterygoid muscle is getting inserted into the disc and the capsule. So, what is this capsule? In fact, the TMJ is enclosed within a capsule, which is called as your joint capsule. Now, please look at the picture. You can see the markings for the TMJ capsule. Within a dotted area, you can see the markings for the TMJ capsule. And please look at the attachment of this capsule. So this capsule is attached to the borders of articulating surface of the mandibular fossa. So you have one attachment towards the articulating surface of mandibular fossa, eminence of the temporal bone, and inferiorly it is getting attached to the neck of the mandible. So these attachments are very clear in this picture. You can see it is getting attached superiorly to the mandibular fossa, articulating surface of the mandibular fossa, eminence of the temporal bone, and inferiorly to the neck of the mandible. In fact, all these osseous portions of the TMJ itself are the attachment sites for the joint capsule. Now, look at the picture carefully. In the anterolateral region, you can see a change in the direction of this capsule. The striations are moving in an oblique direction in the anterolateral region. So that portion where the capsule is thickened to form a band, which is called as your temporomandibular ligament. So please look at the picture. The marking is given TMJ ligament and oblique band, which is in the anterolateral portion of the capsule where it is thickened to form a band called as temporomandibular ligament. So this joint capsule actually consists of an internal synovial layer, and there is an outer fibrous layer which is containing the nerve supply, vein supply, and collagen fibers. So unlike your articular disc, which was relatively avascular and hyalinized, the joint capsule has an internal synovial layer, and there is an outer fibrous layer which has got a vascular and nervous supply as well as collagen fibers. Now the innervation for the capsule arises from the trigeminal nerve. So it is the fifth nerve which is supplying to the capsule, and it has got receptors, free nerve ending receptors also are there for the capsule. The vascular supply to the capsule arises from the maxillary, temporal, and mesenteric arteries. So please remember, the joint capsule is one which engulfs the TMJ. The attachments of this capsule are to the glenoid fossa or mandibular fossa, articular eminence of the temporal bone, and to the neck of the mandible. And in the anterolateral portion, this capsule is thickened to form your temporomandibular ligament. The capsule is vascular with the nervous and vascular supply, and there is an internal synovial layer. So these are the composition of the capsule: internal synovial layer and an outer fibrous layer where you have the nervous and vascular supply. And the nerve supply of this capsule is provided by the trigeminal nerve as well as free nerve ending receptors, and also the vascular supply is provided by MTM, that is maxillary, temporal, and mesenteric arteries. So in addition to the above structures, the TMJ also has got accessory ligaments, which are your stylomandibular and sphenomandibular ligament. So why they are called as accessory ligaments? It's because they do not have a direct relationship with the mandibular articulation, but they tend to stabilize the jaw during tooth movements. So these are the accessory ligaments, stylomandibular and sphenomandibular. They are called accessory because they are not they do not have a direct relationship with the mandibular articulation, but they stabilize the articular system during jaw movements. Now please look at the picture and check for the attachments as well as identify the structures stylomandibular and sphenomandibular. As the name indicates, their attachments are from the styloid process to the mandible and from sphenoid bone to the mandible. So these are the important these are the accessory ligaments associated with your TMJ. So in addition to the above structures, the TMJ also has got accessory ligaments, which are your stylomandibular and sphenomandibular ligament. So why they are called as accessory ligaments? It's because they do not have a direct relationship with the mandibular articulation, but they tend to stabilize the jaw during tooth movements. So these are the accessory ligaments, stylomandibular and sphenomandibular. They are called accessory because they are not they do not have a direct relationship with the mandibular articulation, but they stabilize the articular system during jaw movements. Now please look at the picture and check for the attachments as well as identify the structures stylomandibular and sphenomandibular. As the name indicates, their attachments are from the styloid process to the mandible and from sphenoid bone to the mandible. So these are the important these are the accessory ligaments associated with your TMJ. So associated with the TMJ, apart from your accessory ligaments, in addition you have a minor ligaments associated with it is the otomandibular ligaments. So as the name suggests, otomandibular ligaments connect the middle ear and the TMJ. So they are discomalleolar and tympanomandibular. Now the discomalleolar connecting malleus to the TMJ disc and to the sphenomandibular ligaments. So otomandibular ligaments which connects the middle ear to the TMJ includes your discomalleolar and tympanomandibular ligament. Now let's see which are the muscles involved in the mandibular movements and which muscle is involved in which kind of movement. So first we will see about the lateral pterygoid muscle. Now lateral pterygoid muscle has got a superior head as well as an inferior head. The superior head is active during various jaw closing movements. So please remember, superior head is active during the jaw closing movements, whereas your inferior head of lateral pterygoid is active during jaw opening movements and protrusion. So lateral pterygoid muscles has got two portions. One is your superior head and the other one is your inferior head. So superior head is associated with jaw closing, whereas inferior head is associated with jaw opening and protrusion. So this lateral pterygoid muscles, it is anatomically suited for protraction, depression and contralateral abduction. So the superior head is associated with the jaw closing and inferior head is associated with jaw opening and protrusion. Now the second important muscle is your masseter muscle, which is active during forceful jaw closing and it also assists in protrusion of the mandible. So masseter muscle is like your superior head of the lateral pterygoid is associated with forceful jaw closing and it also assists in protrusion of the mandible. Now the third muscle is your medial pterygoid muscle. So medial pterygoid muscle is associated with elevation and lateral position of the mandible. It is also active during your protrusion. So medial pterygoid muscle is associated with elevation and lateral positioning of the mandible. See, please be thorough with these muscle attachments as well as the muscle which is involved in which kind of movement, because it's a very favorite topic for the examiners and most often we can expect at least one question associated with this. So please remember, lateral pterygoid muscle had two heads, superior and inferior. Superior head is associated with jaw closing, whereas inferior head is associated with jaw opening and protrusion. Now masseter muscle is associated with forceful jaw closing. Also it can assist in the protrusion of the mandible. The medial pterygoid muscle is associated with elevation and lateral positioning of the mandible. It is also active during protrusion. Now, temporalis muscle. There is an important point associated with temporalis muscle is that it is the principal positioner of the mandible during elevation. So, we have already seen in the previous slide, medial pterygoid muscle is associated with elevation as well as lateral positioning of the mandible. But the principal muscle associated with elevation is your temporalis muscle. Now, the temporalis muscle has got a posterior part as well as an anterior part. The posterior part is active in protruding the mandible and anterior part is active in the clenching. So temporalis muscle, it's the principal positioner during elevation. The anterior part helps in clenching and posterior part is active in protruding the mandible. So we have so far seen which are the muscles and the movements associated with those muscles. Now we are trying a reverse approach. Now we are going to see each movement and the muscles involved in each of the mandibular movements, because the questions can ask in both ways. So for a better understanding, we will approach it from both sides. Now, mandibular opening. The muscles associated with mandibular opening are your digastric, mylohyoid and geniohyoid muscles. So, they are active either slowly or on slow mouth opening as well as maximum mouth opening against resistance. So, please remember digastric, mylohyoid and geniohyoid muscles are involved in mandibular opening. Now coming to muscles of mastication, the major muscles of mastication, it is the lateral pterygoid which shows initial and sustained activity during opening movements. Masseter and temporalis, there won't be any activity associated with masseter and temporalis during mandibular opening. So the muscles associated with mandibular opening is your lateral pterygoid and your mylohyoid, geniohyoid and digastric muscles. So these four muscles are associated with mandibular opening. Lateral pterygoid, it shows initial and sustained activity. Now you have your digastric, mylohyoid and geniohyoid muscles. So four muscles involved in mandibular opening. The major muscle of mastication is your lateral pterygoid and the minor muscles associated with it is your digastric, mylohyoid and geniohyoid. See, when you are learning, please remember these minor muscles as well, because sometimes they tend to ask about this mylohyoid, geniohyoid or digastric rather than asking about temporalis, lateral pterygoid or masseter. The examiners sometimes pertain their questions to this minor muscle, so which sometimes we neglect it. So that's why they ask, obviously they will ask this minor muscle. So please be thorough with from that aspect as well. So the mandibular opening, the muscles associated with it is your lateral pterygoid, then you have your mylohyoid, geniohyoid and digastric. Now coming to mandibular closing. So for mandibular closing, except for lateral pterygoid, all the other major muscles of mastication, that is your temporalis, masseter and medial pterygoid, they are associated with the mandibular closing or elevation. So lateral pterygoid was associated with mandibular opening. So apart from lateral pterygoid, the other muscles that is the major muscles are associated with mandibular closing, which is your medial pterygoid, temporalis and masseter. Now the suprahyoid muscles act as an antagonist to this elevator muscles. So the muscles associated with mandibular closing are your temporalis, masseter and medial pterygoid. Suprahyoid muscles act as antagonist, or rather they oppose the action of these elevator muscles. Now the third type of movement is the mandibular retrusion. So this mandibular retrusion can be either voluntary or the retraction of the mandible from a protruded position also. So there are two types of retruded movements. The voluntary retrusion is brought about by suprahyoid muscles, infrahyoid muscles as well as the posterior fibers of the temporalis muscle. So it is a retrusion is made possible by sitting, that is suprahyoid, infrahyoid and the temporalis muscle, the posterior fibers of your temporalis muscle. When we were learning temporalis, we already mentioned posterior fibers are associated with retrusion and anterior fibers are associated with clenching. So voluntary mandibular retrusion is brought by suprahyoid, infrahyoid and posterior fibers of the temporalis muscle. Now the retraction of the mandible from a most protruded position, that is without any occlusal contact, it is brought by temporalis muscle, the posterior and middle fibers of the temporalis muscle. So suprahyoid and infrahyoid are not involved in involuntary muscle mandibular retrusion. There your action or your movement is brought about exclusively by your temporalis muscle, posterior and middle fibers of the temporalis muscle. So coming to protrusion of the mandible. So we have seen retrusion. In retrusion, the major muscle involved was the temporalis. Whereas in protrusion, except for temporalis, all the major muscles of mastication, that is your lateral and medial pterygoid and masseter muscles, are involved in protrusion. So this is like similar to what we have seen before. In mandibular opening, lateral pterygoid was involved, whereas in mandibular closing, except for lateral pterygoid, all the other major muscles, that is your temporalis muscle and medial pterygoid, was associated with mandibular closing or elevation. In the same manner, in retrusion, the temporalis muscle is the major muscle which is involved, and except for temporalis, all the major muscles, medial and lateral pterygoid and masseter muscles, is associated with protrusion. Now, protrusion of the mandible without occlusal contact is from the contraction of these three major muscles, lateral, medial pterygoid and masseter muscles. Now, when it comes to protrusion of the mandible against resistance, in such scenario, apart from these three muscles, suprahyoid muscle group also plays a greater role. So protrusion of the mandible without occlusal contact is the result of contraction of three major muscles, lateral pterygoid, medial pterygoid and masseter. So when there is protrusion of the mandible against resistance, suprahyoid muscle also is involved. In addition to these three muscles, suprahyoid muscle is also involved. Then protrusion of the mandible with teeth in occlusion, that is achieved by the contraction of the pterygoid and masseter muscles. So always remember that protrusion is associated with all the major muscles of mastication except temporalis. But when there is protraction against resistance, so in addition to these three major muscles, that is your lateral and medial pterygoid and masseter, suprahyoid muscle is also involved. So please note these exceptions and which all muscle is involved in addition to these three muscles, in which kind of movement. So such exceptions and variations, please keep it in mind, because they are extremely important, because that's what often the examiners will ask for an MCQ questions. So please keep in mind such things. Now about the lateral movement of the mandible. So in lateral movement of the mandible, there is like a slight difference compared to other mandibular movements. Simultaneously on both sides, different groups of muscles will be involved in lateral movement of the mandible. So in ipsilateral side, there will be contraction of the posterior and middle fibers of the temporalis muscle, whereas on the contralateral side, there will be contraction of the lateral and medial pterygoid muscles and the anterior fibers of the temporalis. So please note, in lateral movement of the mandible, so in this movement, the different types of muscle groups are involved in different sides. So ipsilateral side, on the same side you have the contraction of the temporalis muscle, posterior and middle fibers, whereas on the contralateral side, the anterior fibers of the temporalis as well as the lateral and medial pterygoid muscles are involved. Now we have seen the mandibular movements, the TMJ complex, its anatomy and everything. Now let's talk about the osseous structures associated in the jaw, that is your mandible and maxilla. So the alveolar process of maxilla, it is the portion of the bone which surrounds the roots of the teeth and which gives them the osseous support. So in maxilla, you have a labiobuccal and a lingual plate which are extremely dense, but there will be a thin cortical bone which is separated by the interdental septa of cancellous bone. So that is the composition or structure of the alveolar process in maxilla. You have labiobuccal or lingual plates which are dense but thin cortical bone. So that's made up of thin cortical bone and it is separated by an interdental septa of cancellous bone. So dense thin cortical bone is what composes the alveolar process of maxilla. Please note, it is dense but thin cortical bone and they are separated by the interdental septa which is composed of your cancellous bone. So, alveolar process of mandible differs from maxilla in few aspects. One important difference is that it is not as cancellous as that in maxilla. And second thing is that in maxilla, the facial plate is relatively thin compared to your lingual plate, but in mandible, both the facial and lingual plate are equally heavy. Third important thing is that in mandible, the outline of the arch of the teeth does not correspond to outline of the arch of the bone. So the tooth, if you consider in the mandible, the posterior mandibular tooth will show a slight lingual inclination, whereas the bone tends to have a buccal flaring. So that is why the outline of the arch of the teeth is not corresponding to the outline of the arch of the bone. So these are the differences of alveolar process in mandible compared to that of in maxilla. Now there is one more important landmark in case of mandible, that is posterior to third molar a triangular shallow fossa is there, which is called as your retromolar triangle. So that's an important anatomic landmark in the mandible, that is posterior to the third molar. So that's the name, retromolar, behind molar or posterior to the molar, and there is a triangular shallow fossa, so that is called as retromolar triangle. Now the significance of this triangle is that the cortical plate over this fossa is not as heavy as the bone surrounding it. It is more cancellous under the thin cortical plane covering it. So that's the point at which there is a chances of fracture or any infection to spread out, because the cortical plate over this fossa is not heavy compared to the surrounding bone. It is just having more cancellous bone under the thin cortical plate covering it. So retromolar triangle is a shallow triangular depression or a fossa posterior to the third molar. So this picture is actually taken from Wheeler's textbook of anatomy. Please note this picture. You can see the alveoli of the first, second and third molars. So here you have to you have the special features. You have to notice the special features is that there are thin and perforated surfaces. You can see thin and perforated surfaces in the retromolar triangular space. Please note the retromolar triangular space, which is distal to the last molar, that is your third molar. There you can see slight thin perforations. Now cancellous formations in the alveoli proper, that is in the proper bone socket also you can see perforations, and also in the interdental septa. In the space between the sockets also you can see thin and perforations. So what is the significance of this perforations is that this allows for a rich blood supply. So that is also one of the significance of the retromolar triangular space, where there is a thin cancellous bone. Unlike the other heavy bone covering, the cortical plate covering in the surrounding area, the retromolar area is having more cancellous bone. And apart from the retromolar area, in the alveoli proper as well as in the interdental septa, there are thin perforations in the region of first, second and third molars, which allows a rich blood supply. So now let's talk about the vascular supply to the dentition. So the vascular supply, if you consider it as in a hierarchy, it's actually coming from external carotid artery, whose branch is maxillary artery. So maxillary artery is one of the chief arteries which supplies to the jaw bones on the teeth, which is actually a branch of external carotid artery. Now the major branches of maxillary artery that feed to the teeth directly are your inferior alveolar artery and superior alveolar artery. So if you consider the hierarchy, it is your external carotid artery, whose branch is maxillary artery, and whose tributaries are inferior alveolar and superior alveolar, which are the ones which directly feed to the dentition. So the inferior alveolar artery, which directly supplies the teeth and the jaw, it's a branch of maxillary artery that we have already seen. So this inferior alveolar artery, it actually passes through the mandibular canine before descending from the maxillary artery, after descending from the maxillary artery. But before it enters the canal, before that it gives one branch, that is your mylohyoid branch, which supplies the mylohyoid muscle. And once it enters the mandibular canal, within the canal the alveolar artery gives branches directly to your premolars and molars. And further anteriorly, the artery bifurcates into two branches. One is your mental branch and the other one is your incisive branch. So the mental branch of the inferior alveolar artery supplies the chin region, and also it anastomoses with the inferior labial and submental arteries. The incisive branch whereas supplies the anterior teeth and the bone. So inferior alveolar artery, which has got first branch is the mylohyoid branch, which is given before entering the mandibular canal. On entering the mandibular canal, the inferior alveolar artery within the canal gives branches directly to the premolars and molars, and further anteriorly it bifurcates into two branches, mental and incisive. Mental is supplying the anterior chin region, whereas incisive is the one which supplies the anterior teeth and the bone. So please be thorough with the aspects like which branch is given before entering the canal and which of the branches are given after entering the canal or within the canal. So they could ask you questions specifically like that. So don't be confused. Inferior alveolar artery has got one mylohyoid branch which is given before entering the mandibular canal, and within the canal the branches are given to the premolars and molars, and further anteriorly to the anterior dentition through the incisive branch, and to the chin region the supply is through the mental branch. So we have seen that it is the inferior alveolar and the incisive artery which gives supply to the teeth. Inferior alveolar artery within the canal provides to the premolars and molars, whereas incisive artery supplies to the anterior teeth. So in fact these arteries gives off dental branches to supply to the pulp and the periodontal membrane at the root apex. Now apart from these dental branches, these arteries also give other branches which actually enters the interdental septa and provides supply to the periodontal membrane and to the bone, and finally terminates in the gingiva. So the inferior alveolar artery and incisive arteries which are actually directly giving supply to the dentition, to the premolars and molars by inferior alveolar and to the anterior teeth by incisive artery. So they are giving dental branches which directly supplies to the pulp and the periodontal membrane at root apex. So other than this dental branches, the other branches which provides supply to the interdental septa and the surrounding bone and periodontal ligament is also provided by the inferior alveolar and incisive arteries. So we have seen how the inferior alveolar artery, which is a branch of the internal maxillary artery, is providing the vascular supply to the mandible and the dentition. Now coming to maxilla, the vascular supply of maxilla is also provided by the internal maxillary artery through the superior alveolar arteries. So the first one is your posterior superior alveolar artery, which supplies the maxillary teeth, alveolar bone and the membrane of the sinus. And one of its branches also runs forward on the periosteum and supplies the gingiva, alveolar mucosa and cheek. So the posterior superior alveolar artery, which is a branch from the maxillary artery, supplies the maxillary teeth, alveolar bone and membrane of the sinus. Now the second one is the middle superior alveolar branch, which is given by the infraorbital artery, which is a branch of maxillary artery itself along the infraorbital groove or canal. So we have seen posterior superior alveolar artery. Now the second one is the middle superior alveolar artery, which is a branch of infraorbital artery. Now it is giving supply to the maxillary premolar teeth. So posterior is supplying the maxillary teeth, alveolar bone and the membrane of the sinus, whereas middle superior is supplying to the premolar in the upper arches, and it is a branch of infraorbital artery. Now anterior superior alveolar artery, which is again arising from the infraorbital artery itself, but just before this artery leaves the foramen. So this anterior superior, as the name suggests, it supplies to the anterior teeth in the upper arch and the supporting tissues. Also, this anterior anastomoses with or joins with the middle and posterior superior alveolar branches and completes an anastomotic plexus. So anterior superior is supplying the anterior maxillary teeth and its supporting tissues, and it is in turn a branch of infraorbital artery. Middle superior is also a branch of infraorbital artery along the infraorbital groove or canal, and it is supplying the maxillary premolar teeth, and posterior superior one is supplying the posterior maxillary teeth and also the membrane of the sinus. Now coming to the blood supply of the palate, it is chiefly provided by the descending palatine and sphenopalatine artery. So descending palatine artery, which is originating from the maxillary artery through the greater canal, and it has got one branch, greater palatine branch, which enters the palate through the greater palatine foramen. So, descending palatine artery, which is a branch of the maxillary artery, it has got one branch. That is, it has got several branches. The main branch is the greater palatine branch, which enters the palate through the greater palatine foramen and supplies the bone, glands, and mucosa of the hard palate and to the bone and mucosa of the alveolar process. In addition to greater palatine, the descending palatine also has got few minor branches which is supplying to the soft palate through the lesser palatine foramina. So, when you consider the blood supply of the palate, one important artery is the descending palatine one. The descending palatine one has got one greater palatine branch and one few minor branches. The greater palatine is one which enters through the greater palatine foramen and supplies the bone, glands and mucosa of the hard palate as well as the alveolar process. And minor branches of this descending palatine artery provide supply to the soft palate through the lesser palatine foramina. Now let's see about sphenopalatine artery. So we have seen about the descending palatine artery. Now about sphenopalatine artery. The sphenopalatine artery has got a nasopalatine branch which enters the palate through the incisive canal, and it is supplying to the incisive papilla and to the adjacent palate, and also it has got an anastomosis with the greater palatine artery. So sphenopalatine has got a nasopalatine branch which enters the palate through the incisive canal and supplies to the anterior incisive region, that is the anterior palatine and to the incisive papilla, and also forms an anastomosis with the greater palatine artery. So we have seen the vascular supply to the dentition and the jaw. Now about the nerve supply. The sensory supply to the jaw and the teeth is derived from the trigeminal nerve or the fifth cranial nerve, which have maxillary and mandibular branches. So the first branch we are discussing is the greater palatine branch of the maxillary nerve, which enters the hard palate and supplies to the hard palate and the palatal gingiva till the canine region. So greater palatine is one which provides the supply to the hard palate and to the palatal gingiva as far as forward as the canine region. Now the lesser palatine enters through the lesser palatine foramina and it provides supply to the soft palate region. Now third one is your nasopalatine branch of the posterior or superior lateral nasal branch. So we have just before seen that the greater palatine branch is providing to the posterior hard palate. Now the anterior region of the palate in adjacent to the incisive papilla is provided by the nasopalatine branch. So please note that it is similar to the vascular supply also. The nasopalatine branch of the sphenopalatine artery was providing vascular supply to the incisive papilla and the adjacent region. Now when you coming to the nerve supply, here again it is the nasopalatine one which is providing the nerve supply also, which is actually a branch of the posterior or superior lateral nasal branch. So far we were discussing about the supply to the palatal region. The posterior palatal is provided by the greater palatine branch. The anterior regions in adjacent to the incisive papilla is provided by the nasopalatine branch. And we have also seen the soft palate is being provided by the lesser palatine branch. Now coming to the supply to the dentition. That is also provided by the maxillary nerve through its posterior superior alveolar branch, which is from its pterygopalatine portion. So this posterior superior alveolar branch, it is actually supplying to the molar tooth and the supporting tissues. So just like its name, posterior superior. So posterior region is supplied by this nerve and it is applying to the molar and the supporting tissues, and it's a branch of the maxillary nerve from its pterygopalatine portion. Now, infraorbital nerve, which is again a branch of the maxillary nerve, gives rise to a middle superior alveolar branch, which actually provides through the premolar and the surrounding tissues of the premolar. It actually runs through the lateral wall of the maxillary sinus. So, first we have seen posterior superior alveolar branch, which supplies to the molar and supporting tissues, and it is arising from the pterygopalatine portion. Now coming to middle superior alveolar nerve, which supplies to the premolar and the surrounding tissues, which is a branch of the infraorbital nerve, which in turn arises from maxillary nerve. Now anterior superior alveolar branch, which is also a branch of the infraorbital nerve, and it is arising from the nerve just before it leaves the infraorbital foramen, and it supplies to the anterior teeth, that's your maxillary incisors and canines. So actually when you notice, you can see that the vascular supply and the nerve supply, it's almost the same nerves and vessels. The terminologies are very much similar. Posterior superior alveolar artery, which supplies the maxillary posterior teeth. Premolars are supplied by the middle superior alveolar artery, and anterior superior alveolar artery also provides supply to the maxillary anterior teeth. So in the same manner, the nerve supply is also by the posterior superior alveolar branch. Then the middle superior alveolar branch, which arises from the infraorbital nerve, supplies the premolar region, and the anterior region is supplied by the anterior superior alveolar branch. Again, it's a branch of infraorbital nerve, just like the anterior superior alveolar artery is a branch of infraorbital artery. This is supplying the maxillary anterior teeth, and just like the arteries, the nerves also join in a plexus above the maxillary process. Now coming to the nerve supply to the mandible. Now mandible, it is supplied by the inferior alveolar nerve. So that is the chief branch to the lower jaw. So it has got a few other branches just like what we have seen in maxilla. The first one is the mylohyoid branch, which is given before entering the foramen, and this provides supply to the mylohyoid muscle as well as the anterior belly of digastric. Within the canal, the inferior alveolar nerve gives rise to branches to molar and premolar teeth. So here also we can see that it's almost the same as the vascular supply. The pattern of distribution is almost the same as the vascular supply. It is the inferior alveolar nerve which is the chief branch of nerve supply to the lower jaw from the trigeminal nerve. Now this inferior alveolar nerve has got mylohyoid branch before entering the canal. This branch provides supply to the anterior belly of digastric as well as the mylohyoid muscle, and this within the canal it provides direct nerve supply to the dentition, that is your molar and premolar teeth. The other main branches are your mental nerve and the incisive nerve. The mental nerve supply the skin of the lower lip and chin, and incisive branch supplies to the anterior teeth and the bone. So that is the nerve supply to the lower arch. We have already seen inferior alveolar nerve. It has got mylohyoid branch and direct nerve supply to the premolars and molars. Anterior region, the supply is through the mental and incisive branches of the mandibular nerve. Now the mental nerve supplies the skin of the lower lip and chin, and incisive one supplies to the dentition. So anterior dentition and the surrounding bone is supplied by the incisive nerve. Now there is a buccal branch or buccal nerve from the mandibular nerve. It actually supplies a small area of the buccal gingiva on the first molar and may extend up to the canine and to the third molar, anteriorly up to the canine and posteriorly till the third molar. Now one more branch is there of the mandibular nerve, which is the lingual branch, which supplies the lingual mucosa and gingiva. So buccal branch of the mandibular nerve, which is supplying to a small region on the buccal gingiva on the first molar, and it may extend up to the canine region and the third molar region. Lingual branch of the mandibular nerves provides supply to the lingual mucosa and gingiva, just as the name suggests. So that's all about your dento-ossal structures. Please try to answer the questions and please go through the pictures. You can refer the pictures from the anatomy textbooks as well, because these are all correlated, and if you're going through anatomy after this classes, please try to revise these two chapters. I mean the oral anatomy chapter as well as the anatomy chapters together, so you have a better understanding. And also be very thorough with the muscles and the movements of the mandible and the muscles associated with it. So please try to answer the questions, and if any doubt, don't feel hesitant to ask any questions.